More than 3,000 people braved the cold at Spears Point Park last night to enjoy Opera Hunter's free performance of Strauss's Die Fledermaus. Even the orchestra was sensibly rugged up. The opera was sponsored by Lake Macquarie Council, which put up $13,000 to let the community experience something out of the ordinary. Singers and musicians from the Hunter gave an exceptional rendition of the operatic comedy. The high point of the evening, international opera singer Gillian Sullivan making a guest appearance in the second act. The soprano has just returned to Australia after a decade as a principal artist in Britain and Europe. She now plans to make Newcastle her home base. No wonder organisers are hailing the 3.5-hour performance an outstanding success. Die Fledermaus will be performed again at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre in October.
The Knights' trademark solid defence crumbled against Norths last Sunday. So too did David Smith's self-control, his elbow connecting with Wilson's jaw. Last night the judiciary outed Smith for 4 weeks, bringing to an early end his crusade. He got no sympathy from Coach Finch.
No, it's not a rehearsal for The Sound of Music, but students from Waratah West Public School celebrating their German Day. The school used Education Week to highlight its German language program. It's been teaching students their Eins, Zwei, Dreis for 7 years.
Ich bin Peter.
And a special outing for children at Charlestown's Glendon Special School. "35 intellectually disabled children performed a dance for shoppers and parents at Charlestown Square, assisted by students from neighbouring Hillsborough Primary. Matthew White, NBN News.
It's scenes like this Newcastle City Council Alderman John Tate believes could be avoided if the fitting of smoke detectors was a requirement by law. In Victoria, it already is. And Alderman Tate says it's long overdue in New South Wales.
We've seen recently in Newcastle where a life was lost in the inner city area, and it was said at the time that early warning would have saved that person's life.
The idea is to make the fitting of smoke detectors a requirement of building application approvals. Detectors cost between $15 and $60. According to Alderman Tate, that's cheap insurance for people's lives and their property. Making the fitting of smoke detectors law requires a change to the Local Government Act. Council is preparing a submission for Local Government Minister Jerry Peacock, requesting he amend the Act, and hopes other councils throughout the state will support their idea. A public education campaign awareness about smoke detectors, how they operate and their benefits. Alderman Tate says if state government acknowledges council's request, smoke detectors could become a mandatory fitting by the end of the year. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Proposals are being considered to significantly alter the way general practitioners are organised in Australia. The changes were determined after discussions between the College of GPs, the Australian Medical Association and the federal government. However, the proposed changes have angered resident medical officers, the junior doctors in hospitals who may become GPs. They're threatening to hold a national strike later this month. Hunter doctors met last night to discuss the issue. They've called for a moratorium on the proposed changes.
We're concerned at the gravity of these changes and the lack of input that has been given to us.
One contentious issue concerns the way GPs are trained. Under the new proposal, if doctors want to be vocationally registered as GPs, they'll have to do an extra 3 years study. Dr Michael Boland was involved in formulating the new plan.
I believe that the public have every right to expect that their general practitioners are appropriately trained. We're talking about standards.
Dr Boland says GPs will also have an opportunity to work more closely together, sharing resources and providing after-hours services which are much needed in Newcastle. The John Hunter Hospital has been given a grant to provide additional training for GPs. In the meantime, a representative will attend a meeting in Sydney next week to decide whether to go ahead with the strike. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
About 100 farmers from Aberdeen through to Branxton met at Singleton RSL to find out what's happening to the valley's river and creeks. 82 brought in water samples from their properties, tested on the spot by water resources experts. Only 12 were below the department's target salinity level of 700 parts per million. 1 in 5 samples were nearly 3 times the recommended level. According to the experts, that means if used for irrigation, it would actually damage the soil with too much salt. Thousands of years ago, the Hunter was a giant seabed, so it is naturally salty. However, the farmers allege flushes of water from surrounding mines into rivers and creeks is adding to the problem. At the meeting last night, there was a call for more action from the state and federal governments. Farmers on the Hunter are advised to phone the Muswellbrook Water Resources Office before irrigating to check if salinity levels are safe. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Max McClay has been prawning the Hunter River for 17 years, and a good season could make him more than $30,000. With 30 operators working the river, it's easy to see that prawning is big business to the region. But the loading of the trawlers into the river at Hexham today signals stormy waters ahead. The prawners may be working at a hectic pace today, but in just a few weeks there'll be even more activity both on and off the water. That's when the hauls start coming in and the prawners step up their campaign towards privatisation. Mr McClay believes private enterprise is the only way for the prawners to get a fair deal.
I've been in the game all my life, and the governments don't give you any money, like, you know, they don't give you anything. It's just, it should be privatised, and that's what it's all about. Like, you know, Queensland can do it, everywhere else can do it, why can't New South Wales?
The prawners say it's only a matter of time before privatisation comes in. In the meantime, they're hoping for plenty of rain and big catches when the season officially starts in the first week of October. Matthew White, NBN News.
Lord Renfrew, their first archaeologist in recent times to receive a peerage for his work, is Professor of Archaeology at Cambridge University. His visit to Armidale coincides with the commissioning of a new touchscreen selection computer system for the renowned Museum of Antiquities at the UNE. The museum is well known particularly for its extensive collection of Cypriot artefacts, among others, and Lord Renfrew is impressed.
I think it gives a very wide range for really many parts of the world. I'm looking forward in particular to getting to know the Australian section better, which is something I don't know as much about as I'd like to, but I'm impressed at its range. It's very impressive.
His free lecture tonight at 8 o'clock presents exciting new evidence about the connection between archaeology, language and genetics.
The way genetics today is throwing important on human origins, which I think can be brought to bear on this question of the origins of the world's languages.
But the role of the archaeologist need not be so far removed from the everyday curiosity of the ordinary person, particularly when it comes to understanding more about the past of this large country of ours.
They allow us to understand something about the human past, which is the past of all of us. And if we want to know who we are in the world, what it is to be human, the archaeologists who understand the vast time depth involved are very important. And doubly so if you look at our own homeland, if you look at Australia, if you want to know who lived in Australia 5,000 years, 20,000 years, even 40,000 years ago, it's the archaeologists who are giving us valuable information about the early days of the Aborigines.
Lord Renfrew travels next to Brisbane before winding up his Australian visit in Darwin.
It's possible to cross the city from east to west and soon from north to south at a leisurely and safe pace on a push bike. Bicycle corridors have crept up in between and alongside the city's main traffic arterials, and avid cyclists are keen to extend the network. Soon there may be no need to go bumper to Belmont, and our disused rail line could provide a tree line trip all the way from Adamstown. The Roads and Traffic Authority and local councils are gearing up for change. Some traffic light intersections have been wired to give cyclists right of way. The Newcastle Cycleways movement carried out safety checks before taking groups on discovery tours of the city today.
We want people to discover the cycleways for a start. You know, we've got them, we want people to know where they are. We also want people to discover the joy of cycling, the usefulness of cycling, and I don't know whether you can see that little badge here on my shirt. We think we'd have a better city if people used bicycles more for leisure, for transport, for fitness.
Two likely lads, Khalid Fruitridge of Dorrigo in yellow, weighing in at 83 kilos, squared off against Warwick in Queensland, who tipped the scales at 85.5, and they didn't muck around in the early stages. Both boys threw plenty, and it was Fruitridge who was keeping up the pressure, but Byrne caught him napping and clipped him with a crisp right hand. But things looked up for Fruitridge, and he went on to win the fight comfortably. In the main bout, Joe Sabackley of Parramatta in yellow, the current Australian bantamweight champion, stepped up a division to fight Warwick's Paul Hiles, the reigning Queensland featherweight title holder. Hiles staggered Sabackley with a stunning right and was on top for a while. The crowd urged each fighter on as they exchanged plenty of leather. Hiles, however, had too many guns and he won a majority decision over Sabackley.
The picturesque Guida Valley is an ideal place to get away from the bustle of city life, and that's just what leader of the National Party, Tim Fischer, did this weekend. Having left his parliamentary commitments behind, he flew into War Gorge to enjoy his favourite hobby, bushwalking. In this case with a distinguished group of local climbers from the Capita Climbers Club. Fischer delivered the papers but said locals should be spreading the news about what the region has to offer.
I see a big future for inland tourism right across New England and Guida and beyond as people discover more that the existing national parks have to offer.
On the issue of wheat subsidies, he had this to say.
My concern is they're going to further extend the export enhancement program. My concern is we're going to see Australia further sandwiched by the United States and Europeans in their trade policies.
Local federal member John Anderson is in the United States on a 30-day study tour of the wheat war.
No reports that he's been lynched as yet, but he's in there doing battle for us, politically lynched of course I say, at the farm gate level.
The leader of the National Party then went on to enjoy some time off. Jane Anderson, NBN News. Sergio Sil has captured on canvas the roar of the bushfire and the devastation it wreaks. These images are drawn from the memories of last year's bushfires near his home and art studio at Upper Lansdowne near Taree.
It's rather a dramatic thing to see or to be in, or to see the after effects, so it's quite interesting for a painter to look at that phenomena.
Nature has also influenced Sergio's pottery. The exhibition will continue for a month. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Glen Innes is a town going places. It's the home of the Land of the Beardies Bush Band Festival, the country's largest gem and mineral festival, Minorama, and come May will host Australia's first Celtic festival. All are major national festivals in a town of just 6,500 people. Behind all the festivals is local tourist promotions manager Lex Ritchie. Last year, tourism in Glen Innes generated $19 million. That's 36% of all retail expenditure in the town, and according to figures, accounts for at least 400 jobs. Does it improve business?
Oh yes, my word. Very good.
The Bush Band Festival is coming up again in 2 weeks. Last year, it brought more than 9,000 people to town. Most of the accommodation was booked out long ago.
Last year, the bush music, the mayor estimated that it generated about $1.25 million over that week in town.
These from the recent Minorama Festival. 70% of the world's sapphires are mined in the Glen Innes and Inverell districts. Minorama is the largest festival of its kind in the country. It's the third year the festival has been held, and organisers say they're learning all the time.
We made a lot of mistakes the first time, and probably the second time too, but it's getting better all the time.
For a town its size, Glen Innes has a lot of accommodation on offer. 10 motels, 5 caravan parks and 4 hotels. It's expected all will again be booked out early next year. In May, Glen Innes will host the country's first Celtic festival, a festival centred around this monument which lies just outside of town called the Standing Stones. There are 24 stones in the monument. Earlier this year, 4,500 people came to Glen Innes for a mini Celtic festival. Lex is confident the main festival will attract many more people.
He's going to have the various sections for poets, songwriters, pipe bands, choirs, everything involved in it, and the Fiddlers Rally.
And as the town's tourist manager, Lex always plans big.
I believe it will grow to where we've got the town full for a week beforehand for heats.
Many rural communities like Glen Innes are feeling the pinch of recession and drought, but with a bit of initiative, the blow can be softened.
So I believe in event marketing. If we could fill all the motels in town on a once a month basis by running other events, then I think we're achieving what we're setting out to do. We're bringing money to town.
Jodie McKay, NBN News. For those used to the country, these sites are nothing unusual, but for the overseas tourist or city dweller, they are spectacular. And right in the middle of it all is Oakhampton, a sprawling homestead near Split Rock Dam. Belinda and John Nixon have around 1,500 hectares which they still work, but the property is also open to visitors. Farm holidays come in many forms. Oakhampton caters for families and people wanting more than just overnight accommodation. It's popular with overseas travellers. Susan Reitberger has been in Australia just 4 days.
There's a lot of kangaroos in the hills.
Yeah.
And for a German, it's the greatest to see a kangaroo.
And kangaroos there are aplenty, as well as a curious cat. Visitors to Oakhampton can also play tennis or billiards, relax around the grounds, swim, or ride one of the 60 horses on the property.
It's nice and peaceful and just really relaxing, and you can do things whenever you want.
We've had quite a lot of overseas people in the house, Americans particularly, who all definitely want to ride Australian horses.
In the Tamworth area, there are 15 farm stay operators who work together to increase business. But it hasn't been easy encouraging a coastal-loving population to change their holiday habits.
And I think there is a awareness of what is actually west of the range. A lot of people I've spoken to are quite surprised when they come to Tamworth, for instance, and find that it's as big as it is and there's as much there as there is.
Over the last few years, the idea of farm holidays has grown, but the key to success is marketing, and the owners of these properties have had to learn how to do that.
We're only a small industry. The agent network doesn't really know very much about us or how to access us, and this is what we're working on very hard. But we're gradually getting that together, and there are specialist agents in Australia who handle farm holidays or country holidays.
Last year around Tamworth there were 5,350 bed nights spent on farms by travellers. Not bad, but when you consider they have a potential for around 62,000 nights, there's a lot of marketing still to be done. Bob Moore believes farm stays have the greatest potential of the tourist accommodation industry.
We have a lot of unused potential at the moment, and it's simply a matter of getting people to understand what is out here, that there is something here for everybody, and regardless of what their likes and dislikes or what they want to do.
They were setting up at the stadium, getting set for some mature age students.
A little bit different. This is a level 1 course for school teachers.
These days, to coach the kids, you have to have at least a level 1 accreditation. This is a 2-day course, 26 teachers from the Hunter, Port Macquarie, Taree and the Central Coast, undergoing drill skills. Then they have to do a written exam. How ironic. That seems to be a lot of work to do just to take charge of the under-11s.
The results in 1993 speak for themselves at school, junior and senior level, so we aim to maintain that standard right throughout the coaching spectrum.
With just 80 minutes remaining in season 92, I put it to Keith that perhaps it was just a touch late in the day for this sort of caper. He informed me that in summer there's an off-season surge in coaching clinics.
We have a number of level 1 coaching courses planned for the summer months, as well as our 2 training camps, another sports trainers course. So there's a few things to do, yeah.
Anthony Griffiths, NBN News.
It's an annual event for students from Newcastle University, one last night touring local pubs before settling down for final year exams. Police kept their distance as about 4,000 revellers let their hair down, mostly in harmless fun, but 5 people were charged for malicious damage and offensive conduct. Overall, police were impressed with the crowd's restraint. However, a new system of a bond from students has been suggested if the pub crawl is to go ahead next year.
We've already had brief discussions this morning with the union and maybe looking at how maybe the students might be able to make up to the people in Newcastle if something unfortunate did happen.
Any damage to property this year was minimal, but police believe if the students realise they have to pay for any problems, they'll probably tone down their behaviour. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The paper will be called the Newcastle Times. It'll be free and about 110,000 copies will be circulated in Newcastle and Lake Macquarie. It'll be delivered on a Friday. As well as providing local articles, it hopes to capture the traditional weekend readership interested in motoring and real estate.
We're trying to appeal to local people with what we will see as being local content from a paper that's owned and controlled by local people.
Hilton Grushon is director of Newcastle Times Limited. The company was floated 4 months ago and the response from the public has been overwhelming. Shares have been oversubscribed. Staff are now being recruited to run the weekly paper and it should be on the streets by late November. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Australia has already qualified for the next round of the World Cup Elimination Series with a 2-1 win over the Solomon Islands away and 2 wins over Tahiti, 3-0 and 2-0 respectively. While there is nothing hanging on the match, Eddie Thompson isn't taking any chances and has a healthy respect for the visitors.
Technique-wise, they're very good, they're very athletic. They'll surprise a lot of people tomorrow, I can tell you. It's got to be a tough game.
The Solomon Islands are an emerging force in the South Pacific Conference and are craving as much international competition as possible.
Beneficial for us because, a lot of our players are not exposed to international matches like this, and this is our first time to be in the World Cup elimination round, and it is a great benefit for us.
Northern New South Wales Director of Coaching Ken Kaiser has spent a lot of time in the islands helping develop the game, and he says fans are in for a real treat.
They're wonderful people, they're very skillful, and they've come on leaps and bounds in the last 3 or 4 years. And I think that Australia will have to play to their best in order to get a victory.
Further good news for soccer supporters in the Steel City. Darren Stewart will line up tomorrow at 3 o'clock for the Socceroos, and today he also announced he will be a definite starter for the Breakers this year.
Finally, I hope, touch wood, that it has been resolved, and by, say, Wednesday, I might be an official Breaker player.
With brilliant performances by its younger teams, Australian soccer has the opportunity to kick a few goals at the moment.
Championship in Portugal, we finished 4th. Olympic Games, we finished 4th. I mean, for Australia, we've had an unbelievable year, and now it's the Socceroos' turn. And I think they're good enough to qualify for the USA, so time will tell, but I think they're good enough.
It was secured in writing yesterday. Newcastle is to get $100 million over the next 4 years under the Better Cities funding program. Planning and design work for the project is already underway. According to the Honeysuckle Development Corporation, the money has the potential to generate thousands of jobs in the city and millions of dollars in private sector investment. During the next 4 years, the following work will be undertaken. This site at Carrington will be provided with services such as water and electricity. Roads will also be built. It's hoped that by the middle of next year, the land will be released to the private sector for the construction of around 150 houses. Out of state government funds, a transport interchange will be constructed to work in with the termination of the rail line at Civic Station. As much open space as possible will be opened up to provide access to the harbour. In the short term, this won't be beyond the Lee Wharf area, but studies will be undertaken to determine how best to landscape and link this with the existing foreshore. Sites currently used by the SRA and Hunter Ports Authority will be cleared, and it will be determined how best to use the Civic Railway heritage buildings. As well, a 180-berth marina with full public access and commercial facilities will be built. These are just some of the short-term projects being undertaken. In all, the Honeysuckle development could take 20 years to complete and around $1 billion of public and private sector money. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
It is the way the robberies are being carried out that has police concerned. 4 thefts occurred in the area on Tuesday, all under similar circumstances.
On 2 occasions, people have been working in their front yards when they've returned into their homes where the doors have been naturally left open, and they've found that money and personal items have been stolen from their homes while they've been working in their yards.
Detective De Bono says he doesn't think the thefts are the work of the same gang, and he admits it's only a small amount of cash and belongings that's being taken. But he says it's the responsibility of residents to ensure their own safety.
No, there's nothing like that at this stage, but certainly I'd warn residents that even though they're near their houses, certainly leaving the front door open does provide a distinct hazard.
Meantime, at Freeman's Waterhole, the start of yet another crackdown on driver fatigue. The Lions Club at Morisset had the water boiling this afternoon, preparing for their latest stint at the popular Driver Reviver stop. Since they started providing relief for wearied drivers 7 years ago, volunteers have poured more than 50,000 cups of coffee, and the scheme's success is in the figures. There have been no fatalities along that stretch of road since the program was established. Other stops will be set up in the region in time for the long weekend. Matthew White, NBN News.
It's standing room only for the last game of the year, which for the 2 teams has been vastly different. The Kings, with former Falcons Bob Turner and Ian Rebillard at the helm, have fought their way to second spot on the NBL ladder, a position from which they cannot be dislodged. For the Falcons, a different scenario. Currently second last on the ladder with an 8-15 win-loss record, it would be a brave pundit who tips the Falcons to upset the Kings. But the locals did thrash Melbourne, who are in 4th spot on the table, and with many of the Falcons squad playing for their basketballing future, anything is possible.